everything.
And can they not pick one up back here?
Or back there?
There's a stack of them right here.
Okay.
Ken, what is the topic? What is the topic?
It's just, you can tell, Roy.
Gathering in the great multitude, Revelation 7.
7.
Yeah, Revelation. So, Mars, do you have any announcements?
Well, I just know it's good to be back. We've been gone for more than 2 weeks and just to see all our friends, it was wonderful. And we welcome, there's several visitors here. I didn't keep track of them, but we welcome the visitors. I think they've heard good things about us. If they come back again, we'll know they did. Okay,
Yeah.
welcome to everyone.
Yeah, and for those that are visitors, this is a discussion class. Today we are in our regular Thanksgiving story, which is the lost son, the prodigal son. It was a couple of hundred years of time change. But we're in the lost son this morning, maybe all of Luke 15 to a certain degree. But I actually read the lesson, but getting scattered this morning, I can't remember everything I read. So with nothing else, I think that we need to cover, but it is a discussion class. And if you'd like to make a comment, just raise your hand. Want to hear from you, and we'll be happy to hear what you have to say. Keep your comment brief if you don't mind, because we have a lot of people here, but we do want to hear from you. So Roy, would you have our floor?
Loving Father, why it is Sabbath day. Pray, Lord, that we worship in spirit and truth, and that what we hear and learn placed in our hearts. We ask, O Lord, that we be like the son that came back, his sinfulness, we are part of your kingdom. Our hearts be.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good to see you. Happy Thanksgiving weekend. How is the audio? I'm using my earbuds today, and is it working well? Okay. Part of the reason I'm using them is I'm sitting in a little motel lobby. Might have already seen me get up to let somebody out to get their dog out. And so if there's a few disruptions here, just bear with that. But if the audio is fine and the video is fine, we're doing well. And if you have trouble, let me know. The lesson today is Luke 15. And Ken, we are going to just cover the prodigal son part. So that's the part we're looking at. Open your Bibles to Luke 15. And we study this story every Thanksgiving, and it never gets old. I hope that today's perspective will be a fresh one for you. We're going to look at it specifically through the eyes of giving and thankfulness, and giving out of a thankful heart. And the characters I want you to pay attention to are obviously the two boys and the dad especially. So first we're going to read the story. We're just going to read it straight through without comments. And then I'll have some questions for you, and I'm looking forward to your discussion and your questions. So let's jump right in. Luke chapter 15, and starting with verse 11. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the inheritance.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pod that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to be merry. They began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. And so he called out to one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. Well, so his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you, and you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But with this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Isn't that a great story?
Yep.
As Ken has mentioned to us several times, probably one of the greatest stories in all of literature, greatest short stories, if not the greatest. And if you are reading it for the first time, you almost want to turn the page and say, okay, what's next? What happened? Because it ends in mid-scene with the dad pleading with the son. And of course, the reason for that, if you read the context clear back at the beginning of chapter 15, Jesus is talking to a lot of people who are acting just like that older brother. And he is inviting them to see themselves in the story. And more than that, he's inviting them to decide how the story ends. How will they choose to respond to the people that are like the younger brothers? And so it's a dynamic story. And today I want us to ask ourselves a few questions and see if we can see some things that maybe we hadn't seen before in the story. So through the length of the story, and the story has several scenes in it, and it shifts and changes, of course, between those scenes. Through the length of the story, what seems to motivate son number one? What motivates son number one? That's the older son. This is time for you to speak up.
He's driven by obligation.
Obligation, that's a good word. Thank you. Somebody else, what motivates the older son, son number one?
Duty.
Duty, obligation.
Anticipating the fruits of his labor.
Yeah, anticipating the fruits of his labor. Keep going. Rod.
He's entitled. Feels entitled.
Entitlement. Yeah. By the way, Rod, thank you for your lesson last week. I really appreciated that. Yes, please. I'm far wrong.
Have some grandchildren, and I hear the phrase "no fair" all the time, and so
Yeah.
saying "no fair." Yeah, I've been good. He hasn't.
Yeah. He's motivated by a sense of fairness. Yeah. Obligation, duty, fairness.
He wanted to please the father with obedience, so pleasing the father by being obedient.
Yes, Marlene, I can't see you, but I can hear you. So thank you. Wants to please the dad by obedience. Somebody else. What motivates the older brother? Yes, please, in the back, John.
Thinks he earned it.
He thinks he earned it. Yep. And I can't tell if there's a comment. Oh, there, you're waiting for the envelope, Marge. I wondered if you were coming forward so that I would see you with a comment. Okay. Well, let's take a look at the younger son. What motivates the younger son?
Need for freedom.
Need for freedom. What else?
Selfish.
Selfish. Was that your comment too? Selfishness. Okay.
Gratification.
Gratification. Good. Please. On the
Yeah,
aisle.
both of
I'm sorry.
them,
Say that again, please.
both of them were motivated by selfishness and desire for self.
Thank you. There's a good point there. The selfishness looks different, but they're both motivated by selfishness. And we might come back to that. That's a very good comment. Any other things that you see that motivate the younger brother?
Pleasure.
Pleasure. Mm-hmm.
Well, he was very entitled. He was way more entitled, in my opinion, because he said, "Give me what I deserve," and you don't deserve anything.
Yeah.
Inheritance is a gift. It's
Yeah.
not something we earn.
Yeah. And to just take that a little bit farther, if you stop and think, people in that culture didn't necessarily keep their assets real liquid. These were tangible assets. This was property. It was livestock. It was land. It was equipment. It was outbuildings. This was a large operation, apparently. And the dad, in order to divide it, would have to liquidate some of that. And so this entitlement of the younger brother is this idea, I don't care about the operation of this farm. I want what I want. I'm entitled to it, liquidate it. And you think about losing half of that family estate, and then it just goes up like that. That's quite a sense of entitlement and irresponsibility. Yeah. Keep going. Anything else that motivates the younger brother?
Maturity.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Maturity.
Immaturity. Yeah. Yeah. And again, for every one of these motivations that we name for the younger brother, we probably think of some sort of either different manifestation of the same thing or a parallel trait in the older brother. Just like we notice that selfishness is expressed differently in both of them, I would mention that immaturity is mentioned differently in both of them. The older brother may appear to be more mature because he's the one who sticks it out and is doing the work on the farm while the younger brother's off gallivanting. But there's a level of immaturity with him too. And again, we'll come back to that a little bit later. Now, I do want to ask you what motivates the dad, but I want to hold off on that for just a moment. I want to come back to another trait, and that is distress. What distresses the younger brother? Let's stick with the younger brother for just a moment. What distresses him?
Discomfort,
Say more about that.
hunger, realizing
Okay.
that his quality of life isn't what it used to be.
Okay. So at the point where he is out of money and he's feeding pigs, he is distressed by his physical discomfort. Okay. What else distresses him? Yes, please.
He remembered the love his father had for him. What brought him back was that love.
Yeah. So he's distressed by a sense of loss of love, separation from love, which incidentally, hang on just a second, Rod, is one of the best definitions of heaven and hell that I've ever heard. Heaven is the presence of God. Hell is the absence of God. And if we look at it in that way, he had been in heaven and now he was in hell and he was feeling it. Rod, please.
Before he actually left the house, I've heard in my own family, I'm not good enough. You don't
Yeah.
think he might have been viewing his brother as the one, he's gonna get the whole farm anyway. So I don't feel I'm not good enough, so I want what I want now and I'm getting out of here.
Interesting. I had never thought about that before, that he is trying to beat the inevitable. If the brother is going to get the farm anyway, let me get what I can and run. Huh. That's a really interesting thought. Thank you. Somebody else. Did I miss a hand? Please.
I agree with what he said, because in the Hebrew society, the oldest son received the inheritance. So I don't think it would have been a 50-50 split. He was
That's
still
a
going
good
to get a
point, too.
whole lot less.
Yep.
But the other thing is to talk about being distressed in the Jewish Hebrew society. You don't touch pigs, and he's having to feed the pigs.
Yes. And that had to be somewhat distressing culturally, even though he may not have been a very observant believer at that point. It still was culturally distressing.
Culture.
Yeah. And I think on the front row, I saw a hand up.
Yeah, this, my thought goes along with what was just said, a loss of self-esteem.
Yeah. And I think Jesus crafts this story in extremes, by the way. That part of the reason that we may at times have difficulty in identifying with this story is that we don't see ourselves as reckless as the younger brother, nor do we see ourselves quite as self-righteous as the older brother. Jesus is painting extremes here. And part of that extreme is even where he has to go. Jesus could have pictured him in a lot of down and out situations, but he pictures him in that culture in the most down and out situation that anybody could imagine. Completely penniless, completely belly empty, feeding pigs. And Rob, I think I see your hand up back there.
Well, I have to look at this from a human nature perspective, because that's
Yeah,
what
please.
I think both of them had an extreme sense of failure. The younger brother set off for whatever his intentions was, the Bible doesn't say, and he failed epically.
Yeah.
The older brother put all this work in, and his approach to it was, well, he failed also. He goes to his father and said, look, I've done all this, and obviously it wasn't good enough for you, because you're treating my brother like this. I think it's a sense of failure.
Rob, I think that is such an insightful comment. Thank you. I'd never quite seen it that way, that both of them had this deep sense of failure. And we're going to come to the dad in a minute, because it's so sad that with a dad like they had, they could experience the failure they did. And I would agree with you. Both of them have a sense of failure. It's harder to see in the older brother, but thank you for sharpening our focus on that, because you're right. That his rant to his dad gives this sense of, what am I, chopped liver? And his sense of failure. Lynn, I saw your hand up. Were you raising your hand to make a comment, or you were pointing to somebody? Must be somebody off screen.
Stacy.
Oh, Stacy, please. I can't see you on the screen.
Not the first time.
Yeah, it's where you choose to sit. So
I think you were asking what distressed the younger brother.
Yes, yes.
And I think one of the distresses is that, he came to the realization that he was delusional and that his delusion was false. He took everything that he owned, all of his finances, to invest in this hope of this dream of this happiness he's gonna have. And then he realizes that he just invested everything he owned on a false hope. And now he's left with absolutely nothing and no future.
Yeah.
And that he's just totally squandered all of his money and all of his funds, and he was a fool.
Yeah, that's distressing. That's deeply distressing. I don't know if any of you can identify with that, but have you ever put all of your eggs in one basket and then dropped that basket? That's distressing. Thanks, Daisy. Any other things that come to your mind that distress the younger brother?
I kind of, I'm gonna blame the father a little. Why would he?
Okay.
The man was so young, his son, young people have not developed all their critical thinking skills. Why give him the whole thing?
Yeah, yeah,
But you could predict he was gonna blow it.
yeah.
And he didn't affirm the boy that stayed home
Mm.
till the boy finally had to say, hey, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And the father affirmed him. Well,
Yeah.
he was a little slow, if you ask me.
Okay, okay. Let's
After
hold
the
that. Thank you. Let's hold that thought. Yes, please.
More minor distress would be the realization that the friendships he just made were not true friendships.
Yes, yes.
He
They
was-
were fairly superficial. They were gone. Yeah. Please. I think, yes,
Right. What
Please,
I
Ray.
look at both sons as being life in its full. All of us go through this, in Romans it says, we've all fallen short of the glory of God.
mm-hmm.
Various aspects of our life can be looked at on both sides of the sons. I look at this as a picture of life in its fullness.
Mm. Now say a little bit more, because I was with you through the Romans reference, and then when you said a picture of life in its fullness, I lost you.
Well, life in its fullness is that at some point in our life, we will have failures and we'll have person's experience.
Oh, okay. I get you. You're using the word fullness there in totality, not in terms of abundance.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
So Doug,
Any-
this is Marlene. You don't see me.
Marlene. Hi, Marlene. You're
Hi.
a disembodied spirit.
So I go back to the basics. The younger son that didn't play much in that culture. There was an innate need of belonging. He didn't belong anywhere. He didn't feel that he belonged at home, and then he didn't belong with the friends. He didn't belong anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's why he begs the father, accept me even as one of your sons.
Wow. All of you are hitting on some really deep, important stuff, because think of how significant the drive is to belong. And think about what that will drive many of us to do, to want to belong. Please, John.
Yes, there's no commentary on younger brother's relationship with his other brother or the older brother. I just wonder if there was much to it. So he didn't see his brother as a friendly asset, as somebody he could relate to and identify with. Saw him as going the line and kind of being a stick in the mud.
Yep. Yep. No, that's a good point, that there's zero comment about the relationship between these two boys. And the only glimpse that we get is the comment that the older brother makes about his younger brother when he's so angry. Let's move on. Yeah, please. I missed a comment. Is this Ken?
Yes, it is, Ken. To me, it's real simple about what's driving these two boys. Money. Like in most mystery cases or most other unfortunate
money.
situations we run into, it's the money.
Follow the money.
And, I don't know if you can see me, and to supplement that, the two boys, they were all about what they could get. I'm a fan of the father. He may have made mistakes here, but the father was what I can give. And he may be made a mistake, but his intent was, I believe, appears to be very selfless to me. The two boys, very selfish.
Yeah. And John, you're anticipating where we're heading. Thank you. We're going to hold off on that for just a moment longer, but that's obviously where we're heading here. And I think that whatever mistakes we may see in the dad, that pretty clearly Jesus is using the dad as a representative of God the Father.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that in just a moment. It just dawned on me, because I'm seeing myself big as life on that screen back there, that that's a mirror image. And that when I point to somebody who I think has their hand up, is it pointing in the opposite direction? So, yeah, I think it is. No wonder you're confused by me all the time. Okay, well, that was a mystery solved there. Okay, let me ask the same question about the dad. What distresses the dad?
A request. The request is unbelievable to him at that time.
Yeah.
The culture, I'm sure he was shocked when he heard that request from the younger son.
Yeah, Father, give me my share of the estate.
Now,
Yeah. Yes, please. What distresses the dad?
Well, the dad is distressed at the beginning, yes, but as God, he allows choice.
Yeah.
Because, hey, son, I disagree with you, may be saddened, but choice, of course, you gotta live with it.
Okay, now the microphone scattered a little bit here because I heard one comment and then I heard somebody disagree, and you have all frozen. So are we still in touch with each other? Okay. We've got audio, but the visual is all frozen. I can see I'm frozen on the screen and you're frozen too. So we had a bit of a glitch there. So let me have those two comments again. Even if our picture's frozen, our audio seems to be working. Somebody had a disagreement with another person. Let me hear that again, because I want to hear where we're going with this.
There wasn't one.
It was an agreement.
Oh, it was an agreement? Okay. So you're still frozen. The audio seems to be back basically. Any other distresses that you see for the dad?
Easy.
It must have broken his heart that his son didn't want him in his life anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about at the end of the story? What distress do you hear in the dad's voice at the very end? He has the closing lines in the story. What distress do you have there?
He wanted to be loved and accepted by both children.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to be understood.
Yeah.
In the end of the story there, he is distressed again by the older son's rejection of his love for him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hope, please.
Wendy right here.
Hi, Wendy.
For a couple of years of my life, I grew up with my dad. He was a single dad with 6 children, and I was the oldest. And several things I'm thinking about that would distress, I know it would distress my dad, is when we would bicker, he would tell us constantly, act like you love each other, even if you don't. I still can hear them saying this. And what I'm seeing, a couple of things, is that the brothers are kind of blaming each other. One's blaming each other for their misfortunes, the things that are going wrong. And in doing that, they're completely not seeing the gifts of the father from either
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
Realizing, thinking about being a mom of 7 children, I want my kids to
Mhm.
see what I'm giving them, and when they fight with each other, they miss.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. It looks like our visual is back, but now I'm looking at the backs of your heads. Is there a way that we can turn it around so that I can see your faces?
I think the biggest thing that stressed the father was separation.
Yeah. Yeah. And Dwan, I recognize your voice, even though the camera is not showing me anything right now. I'm completely in the dark, but we'll go forward. Dwan, I recognize your voice. And that separation is kind of the flip side of the belonging, isn't it? Because the younger son separated himself physically, but clearly the older son had separated himself in other ways, that he was right there. And the dad even appeals to him. He says, "You're always with me." But obviously he's not with him in being with him. So
Too about expectations. The expectations are, if you're good, you'll get good. If you're bad, you'll get bad.
yes.
It's just the way life is. And just like in a smaller church, a young teenage lady gets pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody finds out about it. How do they treat her? The old typical way was to, well, let's kind of shun her so she'll understand that she made a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Father here doesn't do any of that.
Right. Right. Excellent. I have a couple of other things I want us to observe, and then I want to land on the dad and really take a good hard look at the dad. Let's talk about the element of surprise. And let's start with the younger brother again. Throughout the length of the story, and there are, remember, several scenes here, what surprises the younger brother? What surprises him?
Father running down the road to him.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet that was the surprise.
How quickly his money ran out?
How quickly? Yeah, yeah.
How
Okay.
quickly those friends were left him too when
How quick?
he was gone.
Yeah. Any other surprises for the younger brother?
I was surprised that squandering all of his money didn't turn out to be as fun as he thought it would.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Hmm.
think
Any
he
other
was,
surprises, please?
think he was surprised by his own foolishness.
Yeah. Yeah. It describes it so briefly here, but in verse 17, when he came to his senses, I think that's the phrase that describes him realizing how foolish he'd acted. Yeah, good. Anything else you think surprised the younger brother?
I think he was surprised that his father agreed to do it.
Yeah, that probably could be true. Like somebody said, this would not be a normal thing, that he could make the demand, but the fact that his dad actually followed through. Yeah.
He was
Anything
not
else
only,
that surprised me? Please,
he wasn't just surprised by his father greeting him graciously after insulting him that he was better off dead than alive to him, but then to throw him a party and have all this dancing, this huge celebration because he was a dum-dum.
Yeah, yeah.
Who is
That had to
that?
be an amazing surprise. I'll tell you what comes to my mind right now is the song that has become so familiar that we don't even catch the surprise in it. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. And of course, John Newton, who wrote the lyrics to that song, knew the depths of wretchedness from his own life as this calloused slave trader who had lived his life in utter opposition to God in so many ways. And for God to reach out and to draw him in, he was amazed. And here there's an amazement, I think, in that had to surprise him. What about the older brother? What surprises the older brother?
But the younger one came home.
Yeah, he thought he was rid of him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What else surprises him?
He was surprised that his dad received him well after such an insult.
Yeah.
Honoring half the estate.
Yeah.
That was a shock. You wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, and in fact, if the dad had died in the meantime, if the younger brother had come home only to find that his dad was gone, and now the farm really was under the care of his older brother, he wouldn't have received any of this. Yeah. Anything else that surprises the older brother?
Doug, this is a story of the father who owns the farm, and he wants to give the farm to both.
Yeah.
And it's a story of how the two are earning their farm. The one's working, trying to earn his dad's favor, and the other one doesn't think he's good enough, so he just says, give me what I want, and he goes away. And when he comes back and he realizes he is good enough just to be a son.
Yeah.
And the other one is surprised because he's trying to earn his way and he finds out that it's not good enough. He just has to be a son.
Yeah. Rod, you have really nailed it. And you've also, I think, given us a segue to go back to where John tried to take us a moment ago. And that is, let's look at the dad. Let's spend some time looking at the dad. So we'll go back to our original question of motivation. And we've noticed that, as in any story, especially in parables, you can't make a parable that is so perfect that it matches the lessons all the way across every lesson that you want to teach from the story. There are going to be gaps. And probably we could find some gaps in the father's judgment or behavior. Somebody's already pointed that out. But let's look at the big picture of Jesus telling this story, and it seems pretty obvious that the dad is representing God the Father. And in representing God the Father, Jesus is trying to tell us something about who God is. Let's look first at the motivation. What motivates the dad? We've touched on this a little bit. Let's come back to it specifically now. What motivates the dad?
Doug, you're missing some hands. There's a gentleman right here that's had his hand up right in front. Sorry about her.
Oh, no, the screen is completely frozen. I have a very static picture of the backs of everybody's heads. So please help me with hands up because I'm not seeing anybody.
We have a comment. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Doug, I'm glad that you mentioned about the father's actions and behavior. It seems that when the father's actions and behaviors, whether we're talking about the father in this parable or the father in heaven, when his actions and behavior are seen through the eyes of faith, then the whole story makes a lot more sense. We see how well the father knew his two sons. And because of that knowledge of the two sons, he was willing to take the expensive risk because of that knowledge, just like our Father in heaven, when he sent his son to a group of brothers who were just adamantly opposed to each other. So see the father, we read there in the story, I forgot what verse it was, I think maybe verse 17, where it says that as the father saw his son while he was a great way off. Well, how is it? I don't know if the son was gone a month, 5 months, a year, 2 years, whatever the period was.
Yeah.
What's the chances that the father would have been out there on the day that he came back? So this tells me that the father had patiently, faithfully, prayerfully been looking down the road, waiting.
Yeah. Yes.
Return of that son. So he anticipated the needs of both sons.
Yes. Oh, Thank you. Such richness there. And if I could just underscore two things. One of them is the apparent foolishness of giving away so much to somebody so irresponsible.
Yeah.
And if we would look at God the Father, there's a sense in which everything that God has done in his generosity toward humankind could be considered reckless and foolish.
Prodigal.
And yeah, prodigal. That's interesting. It could be the prodigal dad. In fact, I think there are some commentators who have said the term prodigal should apply to the dad. We're coming up to the Christmas season, and at Christmas time, we reflect on the reckless, risky, radical love of God. Stop and think about the vulnerability of the creator of the universe coming to live on this planet. And he comes not in an armored car, not in a royal procession, but he comes as a naked little baby to two peasants who can't even find a place to stay except an animal shelter. And there is the creator of the universe lying in an animal feed trough. That seems reckless. It seems risky, and it is. And that's the way that God lives his whole life on this planet. And he ends it much the same way, naked, stripped of everything, and executed in a public execution on a cross. And this is how God chooses to enter our planet. From any human perspective, this is utter folly and foolishness, which is why Paul says that the cross is folly to the wisdom of this world. There is absolutely nothing about the cross or about the entire life of Jesus that makes any sense from a human perspective. Instead, it is utter, risky, stupid foolishness, but it's the abundance of God to us in the person of Jesus when God comes to live among us. And certainly the Thanksgiving season, which we are kicking off, or wrapping up rather, and then kicking off the Christmas season with this story, should somehow awaken in our hearts the amazing generosity of God to people who do nothing to deserve it. Yeah.
Can I say something? This is
Please,
Marlene.
Marlene.
Like the concept of the father being prodigal. The meaning of prodigal means extravagant, lavish.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So as a mother, if I would have to do everything away again, I'll give more love, lavish love, because you'd never give enough love to your children. I'm not talking about big love, okay?
Yep.
Daughters. And that's something I would never regret.
Yep.
Doug,
Yes, please.
this parallel kind of just appealed to me. Father giving half of his wealth to his younger son goes back to the history of Israel. They came and they asked him for a king. And he said, okay, you can run your own lives. I'm gonna give you a king. This isn't my idea, this is my plan, but I'm willing to let you have a king and see what happens. There, any parallel there?
Wow. I cannot believe all of the fresh ideas that you as a class are coming up with. That's an amazing comparison, because again, it was not in their best interest. It was not smart, and it led them down a path of ruin. And yet it was exactly what they asked for. And God says, well, I'll give it to you. I cannot think of a better parallel in some ways than the history of Israel asking for a king and the younger brother asking for his share of the inheritance. Thank you. By the way, am I still frozen on the screen?
No.
Oh, really? So you just saw me take a drink from my water bottle?
Yes.
Oh, how interesting, because you are totally frozen on the screen, and I assumed I was frozen on your screen. Well, I'm glad that you can see me, because all I'm seeing is the backs of frozen heads. And so I'm glad that you can see me. I will have to say that the technology has never, I shouldn't say never, rarely failed us like this. And I'm glad it's not failing you, it's failing on my end. I don't know if any of you remember the time back when we were downstairs in the room we used to be in, down in the main part of the church. And there was a time when I could see you. It was just the opposite. I could see you and I could see you're fine, and you couldn't see me. And so it was a bit, I think, a bit amusing that all of you were staring at this blank screen with a disembodied voice coming from it. And I was seeing you and calling you by name as you raised your hands and so forth. So now we have the opposite issue. But thank you for being patient. And I will probably blame it on the fact that I'm in a little podunk place halfway to Alaska that has a population of 600. And apparently the Wi-Fi in this little motel where we are, I'm doing a weekend seminar here. And there's a little church here, and I'm doing a weekend seminar, and I'm sitting out in the lobby of this little hotel, and it must not have very good Wi-Fi. So thank you for your patience with that.
We are the frozen chosen.
I guess you are. And I am actually I'm looking out the window at snow coming down. It's quite cold here. And we are enjoying being north a little bit. Actually, Lorraine and I are back closer to where she grew up. She grew up not in this town, but not that far from here. And it was this far north where she enjoyed winter and still does. She says, "Oh, isn't this beautiful? This is so wonderful." So that's where we are. Anyway, back to the lesson. Let's come back to the dad.
Hey, Doug, can I make a point real quick?
Please, Rob, go ahead.
I think this is the perfect highlight, the perfect explanation, the perfect demonstration of our misunderstanding of who he is.
Yeah.
Because it covers all the bases.
Yeah.
It really does. We don't understand why the father would behave a certain way. We don't like each other. We don't understand each other's motivations. We think everybody else is wrong except us. And I think this does a fantastic job of explaining how we've got it wrong. We don't get it. Never have, and we probably never will until he comes back.
Again, Rob, just such an amazingly insightful comment. Thank you. And I think that there's a good reason why this is such a powerful story. This story and the story of the Good Samaritan are probably some of Jesus' best known story. And it hits it at such a deep level. And Rob, I think you're right, is that we don't really get it. And this story opens up for us. And as we've been seeing here in the last few minutes, if we spend time reflecting on it, it opens up more and more about who the Father really is. Our time is rapidly coming to a close. And so I want to make sure that we focus on a couple of other things about the Father, and then we'll pull everything together here. And that is, let's talk about delight. And I want you to be really brief about the two boys, and then I want to focus on the dad. What delights each of the sons? You can speak about the older brother, the younger brother, and let's just have a few comments on that. And then let's contrast it with what delights the dad. So let's first look at the boys. What delights the boys? Either one, younger or older.
Possessions.
Possessions.
Adventure.
I'm sorry, say that again. Adventure. Okay. Younger brother, adventure. What else delights the boys?
Observing.
Okay. Anything else?
Rule following.
Rule following. Stability. Yeah. Okay. Now, what delights the dad?
Relationships with his sons.
Yeah.
But may I read a short passage from one of the General Conference bulletins?
Go ahead.
It says, as the youth with weary, painful steps pursues the toilsome way, he knows not that one is even now waiting his return.
Mm,
And when he is yet a great way off, the Father discerns his form. Love is
Yeah.
of quick sight, and not even the degradation of the years of sin can conceal the Son from the Father's eyes. He had compassion on him and ran and
Mm.
fell on his neck,
Uh,
being tender embrace.
oh, wow. That's beautiful. Thank you. Anything else that comes to your mind that delights the dad?
The dad is delighted that the son is returning.
Reunion.
Watching, he's been waiting. Here comes the son, probably in rags,
Yes.
smelling of pigs.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
very dirty at that
Yes.
point. Still delighted to see him coming.
Yes.
Look, picture that is on the wall here.
Yes.
Jesus running,
Yes.
pacing,
Running to that
Yes.
sheep.
and he's gonna go into the muck,
Yeah.
dirt, to get that sheep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey,
And
Doug,
Mike, I think I heard you say the word reunion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody else is making a comment. Please go ahead.
Doug, there's a time to go looking for a person, and the father never went, from what we know, never
Mhm.
went to the city to go looking for his son.
Yeah.
When he saw him coming, he ran. He ran to see him. I'm just wondering what the connotations about that is. I know we don't have much time, but
No, that's a good comment. And if we were to study the whole chapter, we would see that the other two stories address that. That you have the story of the lost sheep, and of course, our picture on the wall does give us a picture of the shepherd looking for the lost sheep, and then we have the story of the lost coin, and the woman looking for the lost coin. And so, I think that Jesus is giving us a fuller picture by giving us all three of these stories, and they really do all go together, and emphasizing there is a time and a place for looking for. And you're right, we don't have time to go into that in any depth right now, but it's obvious that in this story, that's not what Jesus is emphasizing. He's already said that in the other two stories. Yeah, there's a time and a place to look for the lost. This one is emphasizing something different and probably giving a picture of there are times to let people run out their leash. And the story of the Israelites asking for a king is another good example of that. God says, not a great idea, but I'll work with that. Thank you. What other comments does anybody have on, just push that lever all the way down? Yeah. What other comments boy, blast of cold air as that door opens. Any other comments about the dad and what delights him?
I think the take-home message here is that God is a God of second chances.
Yep.
The Bible is full of stories where people got second chances made good. That's what we see here, second chances.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I'm going to use that. We're just about the end of our class, unless there's a hand I'm missing. I want to take any hand that I might be missing because I can't see the hands right now.
Yes, Doug, I would like to just make one brief comment.
Please.
That is the father's joy, you know, when he saw that son coming back. I'm sure that his thoughts were the sacrifice of money, the humiliation of my son leaving me, the debate between my two sons, the anguish that I went through each and every night. I would do it all again.
Yep.
See that my son now was blind, now he sees.
Yeah.
How he lives.
Yep. Am I missing any other hands? Because I'd love to use that comment as our segue into closing.
One
Any other
more
hands?
comment is about free will. What the father wanted most was a loving relationship with his sons, and I think the older son really wasn't there. He was there for a sense of duty, but the younger son has gone away and come back of his free will. And inherent in true love is the concept of a free choice. That's a reason for celebration. Finally, what he really wanted from his sons And now start with the youngest.
Yes, yeah. Let me wrap it up with that because it really is time for us to close our class. But let me wrap up with that. There's some evidence that this story was in some ways a familiar story, that there was a similar story in the culture of that day that was very much like this story up until the close of it. And the way that the story ended in popular culture is the son comes back and he begs for the position of a slave. And the dad thinks about it for a little while. He says, yeah, okay, we'll do that. We'll give you the position of a slave. And years go by, and the son slaves away, finally on the deathbed of the dad, when the dad is dying, the younger son comes to him and he says, Dad, I'm sorry for how much grief I've caused you, and thank you for taking me back as a slave. And the dad finally on his deathbed says, you're forgiven. You've earned your forgiveness. Now, if that was, in fact, the story in people's minds, and that was the way that they pictured God, which would be much more the way that the older brother pictured his dad, then you can see how radical Jesus' story was to say, no, that's not the way this story goes. That's not who God is. That's not the way that you get God's forgiveness. God is scanning the horizon for you, looking for you. And when you come limping down that road, smelling like pigs, I run out and throw my arms around you and I throw a party for you because you're back and you mean everything to me. Two very different pictures of God. And could I ask you today to just reflect on what your picture of God is? Who is God in your mind? Is he the God that the older brother pictured, or is it the God that the younger brother experienced? And if you don't know the God that the older brother experienced, please, this Thanksgiving season, as we head into the Christmas season, reflect on who God really is and who he wants to be to you. That he is deeply, deeply interested in you. In fact, he even likes you. He doesn't just love you, he likes you. And he wants to be with you. And he so much wants you to know that and to experience it. Ken, turn it over to you.
I just want to add one thing about the story. I've read it, taught it, and taught it. And the one thing that I think that really hit home to me as I dug into it through the years, people listen, the real hero of this story is Jesus.
Yes.
Because when he told this story, the listeners did not well up like with this, oh my, maybe we can get a Christmas special show on this. They were enraged when they heard this story. They were thunderstruck that anybody would approach their dad and break tradition and custom to ask for their inheritance before the father dies. They hated the story. They hated it. It was so repulsive to them. Yet Jesus broke the ice, Doug has said many times, shared something that made everybody very uncomfortable that needed to be said. Next week, I'll be leading our discussion, and we're going into 4 weeks of Mary, the mother of Jesus. 4 weeks. What a story. To me, it is the beginning of a new church. New church is about to be born. So I hope you come next week, and I look forward to seeing you. John, will you have our prayer, please?
Father, thank you for bringing us together again, for helping us relive this story, edit these lessons into our hearts, help us understand it, so as we walk out these doors, our life has changed. And not about me, but about us. Hope we lift others up.
Thank you. And Roy's paper in the back, if you'd like to get a copy. Thank you.
Well, she's the one. Off I go. Haven't seen you forever. Hey, see you. Yeah, I was thinking about you. Yeah. Congratulations. She's with the group.